Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. Welcome to Citizens NYC's June 2022 Rethink and Rebuild, where we engage in monthly community conversations that are meaningful for the collective good. We are joined today by my friend, my colleague, and my fellow queen, Desi K. Robinson. And just going to share a little bit about Desi with you. Desi is a community health professor, a media commentator, a birth postpartum doula, a diva pharma, and an urban belle. So she wears a lot of hats. Desi's work uses media as a lens to explore the intersections of pop culture and public health. She created, produced, and hosted Women in the Making, Tomorrow's History Today, which is a health and lifestyle radio show amplifying the voices of girls and women, and was a health and literacy educator in Ecuador. Desi has also served as a reporter for WBAI Radio in New York and Rice and Peas magazine in London. So she's international as well as intersectional, y'all. Desi is currently a doctoral student in health education and behavioral studies at Teachers College, Columbia University. She holds an MBA in media management, a BA in communications, and a certificate in community health work. Desi enjoys all things garlic and orange lollipops from the bank. And Desi is one of Manhattan's newest appointees to Manhattan Community Board 1. So shout out to you for that, Desi. And in today's community conversation, we're going to hear, among other things, recognizing and practicing intersectionality in our movements and mobilizing our communities to understand and participate in hyper-local government. So again, Desi, welcome and thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to join us today. So I'm going to, start off with a few questions, right? And so and I'm going to frame those questions. And so our discussion today is a nod and a hat tip to Juneteenth. And the title of our discussion today is Freeish, right? And so we know with Juneteenth, it wasn't until the 1865-ish that the last people in Texas were notified of their freedom, right? And so what we will be talking about today is learning how to navigate local New York City government so we can protect the rights of all New Yorkers, particularly those who are Black New Yorkers, those who are LGBTQ plus New Yorkers, and those who are female New Yorkers, and those who sit at the intersection of those identities and so many more. So we're gonna, have a discussion about what the role of law is in protecting those rights and how can everyday New Yorkers, such as you who have gathered with us in our community conversations today, practice self-determination, and how can we hold elected officials accountable to ensuring that those rights are protected. And so transitioning to my first question for our guest today is, what does Freeish mean to you? And how do we continue to protect and expand freedom to everyone?
Hello to everyone. It's wonderful to be here. Happy Juneteenth to everyone. And I immediately feel like, these conversations oftentimes have us sort of preaching to the choir. If you're here, you're already engaged. And so we're oftentimes, sharing information in different ways that we kind of already know. And so my hope is that we can think about the ways in which we can pivot so that we can bring in folks who wouldn't normally be here or who wouldn't even feel the need to be engaged. And so when I think about your first question, which is like, what is freeish? I believe that freeish is this idea of being emancipated from kind of the older ideas of slavery and Jim Crow, but being fully free really involves a deeper possession of actualizing your full potential and your desires without the specter of white supremacy and patriarchy. And so those things are built into our systems. And so it's a pretty lofty goal if you kind of think about it largely. But our freedom is really connected to the parts of our society that are the most marginalized. And so, you know, there's a saying, if you look at a nation and you can tell the health of the nation by the way they treat their, you know, their poorest and most marginalized citizens. And I think that that is true. And I think we have to think about that in our communities too. I think it's important that, for example, white women and people with privilege don't experience marginalization in the same way that our most marginalized people do. But it is important to recognize that as long as people with the least rights suffer, your rights will always be threatened. And so, for example, we're experiencing this disgusting wave of Asian hate in our communities as a result of rhetoric around the coronavirus. And I think it's really important that we recognize, and this is in no way to diminish at all what is happening with our Asian brothers and sisters, but when I hear stop Asian hate, I never hear, oh, but what about all hate? Why don't we stop all hate? In the same ways we do when we talk about anti-Blackness. So I think it's really important that we recognize that people who have certain levels of privilege recognize that their privilege will always, and their rights will always be threatened as long as there is deep anti-Blackness and sort of an erasure of our Indigenous brothers and sisters. And I think we can look at that throughout different movements. For example, you know, the rights that gay white men have, particularly gay white men who are cis and straight presenting, their rights will always be at risk as long as trans people and non-conforming people are at risk.
So thank you for that. And as you were speaking, there is a saying, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I cannot remember it verbatim, but each group was sort of named and they sort of came for that group until they came for the last group. But because nobody in the previous group stood up for people in the previous groups, when they got to the last group, all levels of protection had just been eroded. And
right.
So, yeah, and so there was a sort of cleansing, if you will. Yeah.
I remember what you're talking about. It's like, you know, they came for men and nobody stood up, and the women were taken. It came for women, for white women, and then, you know, nobody spoke up for them, and then they were taken and they spoke for cis women. You know, it's sort of this recognizing that we're all at risk if we're not at the top of the food chain.
Right.
But if you at the bottom of the food chain, you can be assured that anyone's privilege above you is sort of it's nominal to the degree that you will be recognized as long as their needs are met.
For sure. So definitely have to go all the way to the margin and just really recognize that people are people, right? Systems have in some ways eroded the humanity of humans that in some instances, when rhetoric is put forth, it doesn't even recognize the fact that people in some groups are human. So here's my next question for you. What does freeish mean relative to Juneteenth, and what meaning does it take on in the context of current day challenges, some of which you have spoken to, that BIPOC and other groups face?
So what does freeish mean relative to, well, when I think about Juneteenth and sort of freeish, you know, Juneteenth really speaks to those last enslaved people who were notified of their freedom in Galveston. And so if you sort of look throughout history in the United States, there is always this piecemealing of freedom. You know, it's like we get an amendment here, we'll get some, you know, Bill of Rights here. And so even when we were emancipated, there wasn't a full recognition of that across the United States. There still had to be this trickling. And so Juneteenth, I think it's important for people to recognize is that it is not the Emancipation Proclamation, it is that final freedom of our last enslaved brothers and sisters in Galveston, Texas. And so, you know, I think free-ish is really a perfect term because it implies that you know, it's a little bit better, but it ain't what it, you know, it ain't what it's supposed to be. And so I think that freedom is a compromise. And unfortunately, people with the least power have to compromise the most in terms of freedom. And so, you know, we can't be, I mean, and this is just the truth, we can't be fully free and fully protected. And if you think about the ways in which people define their own freedom, it means they want to do whatever the hell they want to do. But that, as we have seen in many instances, most recently with our gun laws, that your ability to do whatever you want has a very deep effect on other people. And so again, I think, you know, if we sort of reference the earlier part of our conversation, when we talked about people with power and privilege and people with less, those, you know, that idea of freedom is not necessarily defined in the same way. And the threat of that freedom being shaken and withholden is still at play there. And so I think that in the current day challenges of BIPOC people and other groups, I think that there, you know, this level of self-determination, I think, is so important. But I'm also really tired of telling people who are mostly deeply marginalized to, you know, pull themselves together and to, you know, we can do it. We're constantly in this, we can do it, you know, state. And so there has to be a way in which we understand more deeply these mechanisms of power so that we're not constantly trying to survive. We should be thriving. In 2022, we should be thriving.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting that in the 21st century, there are still very many firsts among BIPOC people. Whereas if you look in, you know, some other societies, this is old hat. You know, we've been doing this for a long time. You know, y'all just getting to this point in the race. So
certainly,
which is actually a great segue to the next thing that I want to, you know, talk to you. So there's this tendency, right? And it could be just because that's how we're educated, but there's this tendency to put civic engagement into 2 or maybe 3 major buckets. Those buckets include voting. They include contributing to financial electoral campaigns through financial contributions, and to other to protests, right? So those are the 3 main buckets that I have observed as a social analyst about how we, you know, frame civic engagement. But there are just so many other ways to be civically engaged. So talk to us about some of those other maybe non-mainstream ways that civic engagement takes on life.
You know, I was having a conversation with some of our colleagues, our leaders of color colleagues, yesterday, who also sit on community boards, and our sister Constance Barnes, I think I see her, is here. And what I think is important is that we engage in year-round sort of electoral education. I think in schools, institutions of faith, cultural social clubs, fraternal organizations. I think it's important that people even understand the difference between community boards, assemblies, judgeships, Congress. I think that in many instances, people really kind of throw their hands up and withdraw because it is so deeply confusing for many people. I don't think it's necessarily people who are here engaged with us today, but I think the people who we are consistently trying to mobilize, oftentimes feel very overwhelmed. And I think that year-round education can help demystify what some of our institutions and organizations look like. For example, the community board that I sit on, I chose to sit on the community board where I work, which is at Metropolitan College of New York, which is in Manhattan's Community Board 1. I live in Manhattan's Community Board 12. My assembly district is 17. My congressional district is 12. My New York City Council district is 7. Even just hearing that is enough to make people, be like, it's too much. There are some judges that are appointed. There are some judges who are elected. Mm-hmm. And I think that people in our communities have to hear from elected officials on more than 2 occasions when they are jockeying for money and when they are trying to be elected. And I think that many of our New York City elected officials do excellent work. I see them all over. I just saw Brooklyn Borough President Antonio Reynoso at the Doula Expo, and he announced that expo that he was committed to appropriating $45 million to the 3 public hospitals in Brooklyn, specifically to address maternal care because of the abysmal numbers of Black maternal health in this city, where 7 to 10 Black women are more likely to die having a child than a white woman, than their white counterparts. And so there are elected officials who are engaged, but I do think it's really important that we meet people where they're at, and each one teach one. And I think it has to happen throughout the year.
So that is awesome. And here at Citizens, one of the things that we do to be a bridge between community and electeds, we hold info sessions on the grants that we do, but we also hold borough huddles. So each borough will be there will be, it's like a mini town hall where the borough president or their designee will be in a community conversation similar to this, that their constituents be able to talk directly to them about what quality of life issues are most important to them, and hear directly from that borough president what their vision is for the borough and how they plan to improve quality of life issues. One of the things I want you to share, if you would be so kind, my queen, you live in one district or community board, but you work in another. Tell us why you chose Community Board 1 as opposed to, I think it's Community Board 12 that you said you live in?
Yes. So when I heard that Manhattan Borough President Mark Levine was interested in further diversifying our boards in throughout the borough, and I think that this was an effort that was being made with other borough presidents as well throughout the city, I looked at the demographics of which are available. I think that's also important for people to know. I looked at the demographics of my home community board, and though Black and Brown people are not a monolith, we certainly come to the table with different experiences and different ideas and approaches about the ways in which we want to have a common goal. I felt that I might offer more diversity and opportunity to kind of disrupt if I went to my community board where I work, which is predominantly white, older men, predominantly male and more up, a higher socioeconomic group of people who are like more upper middle class. And I thought that that could be a place where I'm none of those things, and my voice, could spark at least thought. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to shift and change the fabric of the community, but it does mean that there are still people within that lower Manhattan community. And the other reason I thought it was important is because Metropolitan College of New York is a predominantly Black and brown school. And I thought that that would be a great way to bridge, particularly with our community health programs, our disaster management programs. Those could be ways that we could address some of the issues in lower Manhattan, environmental issues. We have to be apprised of what is happening with climate change. And I thought that that would be a really great way to bridge some opportunity for Metropolitan College of New York, with a community board who is looking to do the work of addressing climate change.
That is just so awesome. So I'm definitely looking forward to hearing more about how those meetings go. And I just might pop into the meeting if they are virtual, just to see you in action and just to observe the reactions of people who are in the room, and their reaction to someone who in some ways is foreign and exotic in their midst, right? And my hope is that they will, treat you with every deference and respect that is due you. And then, I just want to encourage you to keep up that work and to keep, moving into spaces and educating, right? So it goes back to what you said at the top in response to a question. It becomes about educating. And so education is sometimes not the traditional chalkboard, classroom, passive student, you sit, teacher, you talk. It's about, getting out there and engaging and interacting with people and learning. So definitely looking forward to following you in that journey and learning more. So transitioning to my next item. So freedom is a noun, and it empowers actions that undergird the rights and the freedoms that we enjoy. So how can CitizensNYC community leaders civically engage continuously to protect some of, protect our rights and advance our freedoms?
If I knew the answer to that, I could bottle it and sell it, and I'd be a woman.
And share the proceeds with me, right?
And to the victor go the spoils. I think one of the things that I think could help is if we sort of attach civic education to the things that people care about or have questions about. Like, a lot of people wonder, how did that street get named Tiro Puente Way? How did that bridge turn into, Mario Cuomo Bridge? When did these rent laws change? And I think oftentimes we don't see the result of something until it's already done, things that are a year or two in the making. And so I think that if those may seem like small things, but I think people understanding the process by which those kinds of things happen could lead to more engagement around things that maybe have a deeper impact on their life. And so and you guys just do such excellent work. I think if there were any kind of way to sort of shift or pivot, the work that you're doing, it might be to attach it to sort of smaller, possibly innocuous, things that people may be curious about, and then have them understand that those processes are attached to other things that have far greater impact on them.
Okay. All right. So I am going to ask you one last thing, and then we're going to, I want to say maybe either move into our breakouts or have a little bit of Q&A, live Q&A from the audience. So call to action. What is it?
Listen to Black women.
All right. All right. All right. You know,
that's my first, that's my first one, because, Black women are the, they're, I don't want to say we're the shapeshifters, but we are the ones that sort of, fill in the ways that have us really intersectionally understand, how things work. And I would pair that with take care of Black women, because we are often called and tasked with solving the problem, healing from our own pain, being, coming up with the recipe for healing others' pain, being the bridge, being the back. And we do all of those things because we understand that our freedom is tied to that. But I do think it's really important to understand that we have to take care of the people who do the most. And it seems like a very simple thing, but it really is important to keep this work going. And that is oftentimes Black women, Indigenous women, Black queer Indigenous women. And when I say take care of them, I don't mean just woo, 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 Black women are queens. We are. But it also means that if we're trying to start businesses, that we create pathways for them to do that. If we're looking to run for office, that we're also funding that, and Black women are not having to find funds. I mean, if you look statistically at Black women who try to start businesses, run for office, their funding pools are often much less concentrated than if men do it. It's far spread out. And so I do think it's really important that we recognize that taking care of Black women, Indigenous women, and our most marginalized women doesn't mean that we're just singing their praises after they do the work. It means that we're also providing pathways for them to do the things that they need to do, and providing soft spaces for them to land on.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And I'm going to toss to our illustrious CEO, Dr. Desi K. Harris, to have some words. Dr. Desi?
Hello, thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Thank you, Dr. Branch, for just bringing this message. I just wanted to make sure that everyone caught what's happening in this conversation. I think Freeish talks about, number one, what Juneteenth is speaking to, is the fact that we can get to a point where we can, number one, get a part of America's promise. Emancipation is one part, but for it to be delivered, sometimes it needs to be enacted. Sometimes the message, the aspiration of the goal is a little bit more delayed than the first action. So we need to live it. So I heard that we are grounding our understanding of rights within the origins of struggle. And so hopefully we can all see ourselves in the struggle of Indigenous people and on this Juneteenth holiday of what Blacks have gone through in America, but recognizing it has something to say for all of our rights, and that we only do as well as the least of these do. Number two, the role of civic engagement, of even creating the space where rights can be enacted into laws, into policies, that we have the chance of living them. And number three, that wins matter. Smaller wins of naming streets and being able to clean up your blocks have an implication for some of the larger things that are happening. So I'm just so excited about all of the Citizens Committee folks, applicants, and the grantee partners that do the work every day, that I hope that you pass the message on of civic engagement and being involved in some of these political processes and having folks show up because it makes a difference in the larger whole. I also wanted to recognize that Happy Pride Month for everyone, for LGBTQI plus communities, and for a message on Pride. You can see Peter Kosmeyer, my predecessor, and Doug Hearn, who were honored, part of our New Yorkers for New York campaign. We have a video of them together with Yin Kang on our website. And I'm just really wanted to kick off with the first question, which is, Desi and Leslie, what do you want our grantee partners to do now that they've heard this conversation? Like, what are some of the things that, average New Yorkers can do?
Desi, you want to take that one first and I'll follow you? Okay, so as it relates to our grantee partners, just, continue doing what it is that you're doing in your community, in your neighborhoods. When you see what is happening, get a couple of your friends, create some sort of a plan to address whatever the issue is, and then roll up your sleeves and move forward in that. Attend some of your community board meetings. I had the privilege during our grant outreach season to just, sit in and listen because most of those meetings are still being held virtually, and just the energy in the room, from ordinary citizens who are observing and not just simply spectating, but observing and then giving voice to what the challenges are, and then doing something about it, right? And nobody is paying them to do this. These are people who live in community, who are invested in their community, and who have little to no resources. And so pooling their time, their talent, and their treasure makes a difference. That's how any group that has ever gotten anywhere has done so. Right? Yes, there is a narrative of personal responsibility, and we should all be personally responsible. But when we go together, we go far, as the African proverb says. So that would be what I would say.
That's a tough act to follow. I always know that Dr. Leslie's going to bring it. One of the other things that I think would be, because again, I think that some of the things that we engage in feel so lofty for some of the members of our community. Like we have heavy hitters here who are doing amazing things, community gardens, and like it's phenomenal. I think one of the things, because again, I think it's really important to recognize those levers of power. As we come out of the pandemic, this is kind of a, right now, but I would try to bring elected officials, people who are running for office, into more intimate spaces. I think that's a way that we can kind of demystify those roles. Those roles are extremely important, but I do think that they feel a little far removed for some people. And so, possibly hosting like coffee chats or brunches inside people's apartments, inside people's homes, and then bringing your family and bringing your friends around to just be able to be in community with people who have, significant levers of power. Like all of those people who run for office, who sit in these spaces in our city, they have families too. Like these people are not going to bite. These people are, they may say no, but it would behoove them to be in much more intimate spaces with us.
Awesome.
Right.
So, Dr. San, any further adds to that?
No, the last comment is I'm glad that you're reiterating. I think the power of Citizens Committee obviously is the fact that we have grant resources to give out. But even greater than that, creating these forums where we can interact with one another. We can interact with local elected officials and public agencies that we've done over the course of the years. The Borough Huddle that Leslie was talking about are examples of that. So really excited that that part of the process, the individual actions combined with access to people who have, institutional power, I think is the way to unleash the potential for us to get our rights together and also to make sure that we all can prosper. So just thank you for this conversation. Look forward to the breakouts and for the rest of the Q&A.
Awesome. All right. So I'm excited to to shift us and pivot us to the smaller and the more intimate conversations that that Desi was alluding to. And so let's transition to breakout rooms. And we have some prompts in the chat that will guide your discussions in your smaller, intimate virtual spaces. So we're asking for you to share your name, your neighborhood, the work that your group does within community. And if you're not part of a community group, talk about what you're interested in doing to improve the quality of life in your community. And you might find a group that you can join here at Citizens. The second prompt is, what can I help someone with? And the third prompt is, what can I use help with? So.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Leslie. So I'm going to put everybody into breakout rooms. We're going to have until around 12:50. If you need to hop off, that is okay. We understand you all are busy, but if you want to take this time to connect to community members, we'd love to see you in those breakout rooms. So we'll rejoin around 12:50 so we can share with the entire group. And I'll be hopping between rooms just to check in and see how it's going. So I'm going to assign those rooms now. It sounds like there were some great meetings happening, and definitely these breakout rooms go by so quickly. So I appreciate you sharing that. It was a great conversation. Kofi, do you mind if I bring you to the front and you can share a little bit more about what your group chatted about? Are you okay being in the spotlight?
Yeah, no problem at all.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. Hey, good afternoon, and thank you all for that. The speakers earlier, I was taking notes. Really inspirational, and a lot to think about when I go back into my community. So thank you for putting together this Juneteenth conversation about liberation and how to show up in your community. We had a really great talk. I've already learned a lot that's going to be on my mind for the rest of the day about Burkina Faso, which I just looked up on the map. In West Africa, and they're doing amazing work where they are connecting really almost, especially as, around this day of Juneteenth, how important for a lot of us who have been severed from our history with Africa, for them to be actually reconnecting Black Americans with their African ancestry and being a way to, almost this guide back home to Africa. So, much love and props to that. I'm Kofi Thomas. I'm a Black farmer. I'm the director of the People's Garden and the founder of the Good Life Garden in Bushwick, Brooklyn. And so we do a bit of the connection of folks at our level, community level, where the purpose of our gardens is to really have a place where the community can have some autonomy and connect and build solidarity. We grow tons of fresh, free, organic food every year. We hold workshops on how to grow food, and a lot of our mission tends to be around Black liberation and land ownership, and really just talking about, whose land is it and why, those fun conversations. And yeah, it's just fun to see just how a lot of the work that's happening around New York connects in some way. And yeah, thank you to CitizensNYC for supporting all of this and giving us a platform. And our other panelist, Junie, has trouble, but I'm looking up JCC Homes and I'm going to read more about that. So yeah, that's it for my part of our group.
All right. So again, our profound thanks for taking time out of your schedules to just be with us, to fellowship with us, to be in community with us. This has been time well spent, and I'm sure each of you would agree. And so as we prepare to leave one another's company or presence, may we, always bear one another up in our thoughts and our prayers, and in whatever we can find our hands to do to help one another, because for sure it is through the help one to another that we go anywhere. We all stand on somebody's shoulders, and it is our turn and our time to be now waymakers for those who are coming behind us. And Citizens would not be able to do the work that it does, right, without the waymakers who have made it possible for us. And so we would like to thank our funders and our supporters that help to make our grants possible to you, the community leaders doing work. We would like to thank Mollie Parnis Livingston Foundation. We would like to thank Wells Fargo, Ferris Foundation, TD Bank, National Grid Foundation, and all of our generous donors. And again, our profound thanks to you, the folks who are on the front lines, doing the work every day and making it happen. So remember to join us and be on the lookout for our borough huddles that will be starting in July. So definitely, visit our website, www.citizensnyc.org. Look for the events page. Whatever we're having, you of course are welcome to, just sign up and register and show up. Showing up is what it's about. So until next time, thank you.